OPIN006. I'm here with Russ Bauer, and he's got some great stories to tell. I hope we can get to some of them.
Okay.
Russ,
See what we can do.
tell us what you were born in New York City.
Born in New York, that's right.
And then moved to New Jersey.
Moved to New Jersey, northern part of the state, just outside New York, across from Staten Island, and stayed there, all my childhood life until I went to the Merchant Marine Academy, and then went active duty in the Navy. And as luck would have it, I ended up moving back to New Jersey. It was totally not unplanned, but Lockheed offered me a job and sent me there. So anyway, while I was growing up north, I was in a Masonic family, and I say that because I'm fourth generation Mason, and
I'm fourth award expert, rifleman.
Oh, okay. Well, I got my Navy expert sharpshooter, not pistol. I'm sorry, and rifle. But anyway, where was I?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. The family was very active in all the Masonic fraternities. My mom was in Eastern Star. My dad was in, the different Masonic branches. Scottish Rite, York Rite. In fact, at one time he was Grand Commander in New Jersey. And I was in DMLA. And I went into DMLA when I was 14 years old. So I've been in Masonry, one form of Masonry, or the adjunct bodies ever since. When I went to the Merchant Marine Academy, I sailed for Exxon for a little bit, and then got bored of being a bus driver, I guess you should say, and activated my commission in the Navy. Made a lot more money in the Merchant Marine, I'll say that. They make about, if I remember right, I took a 75% pay cut to become an ensign. And that was in '75. And when I did that, I was assigned to a ship on the West Coast, USS Cook. It was a small frigate, 1052 class, and we made our first deployment. And during that deployment, we went out on Operation Frequent Wind and Eagle Pole, which was the evacuation of Saigon and Cambodia. And it was a small ship, and we're out there with a task group. We had the big deck Midway that took the majority of things. But when her deck was full, we would have helos bring refugees out to us, and we would land them. And if they had enough fuel, send them off. If they didn't, we'd put pipes underneath the skids, roll them over the side, and throw a couple $1 million of aviation equipment.
Tax dollars hard at work.
Into the water, but we needed
Do
to
what
have
you gotta
a
do.
flight deck to bring people off. And I can't remember the exact number of refugees we brought on board, but it was quite a bit. They were on the mess decks and the helo hangars and the passageways, and we just kind of did everything we could to keep them comfortable and take care of them if they needed any medical attention, and brought them back into the Philippines. So that was my, my start of my Navy career anyway, and throughout the Navy I had a lot of experiences, some really good, some not so much, but nonetheless it was all good. And I spent my first, after I was raised as a Mason, I spent my first 23 years on active duty in the Navy. I never went through the chairs, never got super involved. I visited lodges wherever I went. My main places I was stationed was Newport, Rhode Island, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, San Diego, and San Francisco. So I would visit lodges in those areas, and it was interesting to see the different Masonic jurisdictions and how they did work. Very similar, but very different in some cases. And then again, when I was overseas, I would go to lodges in the Philippines and Japan, over in the UK, and it was enjoyable. But I never got involved in terms of going through the chairs and directly involved with a lot of it.
Well, now that brings up a question. So being raised in a Masonic family, when you were first coming into the lodge as a Mason, when you were first being initiated, kind of having that background before, what was your first impression?
Very first impression?
Very first impression.
Very first impression. When I was in the preparation room was, what the heck are they doing?
It's a mystery.
I had, even though it is a Masonic family, I had no clue as to what was going on. Now, the interesting point is once I was in the lodge room and, they were going through the rituals, some of the aspects, it's different ritual, but a lot of the aspects are very similar, So I was tracking probably better than, the other candidates I was with as to what was going on. But I do remember in the third degree, and Jersey does a little bit different than you do, where the junior warden actually vacates his chair when the candidate is brought in, and the candidate is placed in his chair and then jerked out of it.
Wow.
Okay.
Before the actual ritual starts. And it was, again, being DeMolay, it was like, this isn't right. I know this is not right. Something's going to happen. So, you did have a bit of that background. And it helped understand things, because I really enjoyed my time in DeMolay. I was extremely active in it. And the other interesting thing, since you bring it up, is my church was very Masonic, and all the advisors of DeMolay were Masonic. So as I was going through the degree, I'm hearing the voices. Okay, that's Mr. So-and-so, that's Mr. So you kind of knew, I knew who was playing what part during it, which was kind of different. While I was still Ludwig, it was interesting. But no, it was very good. DeMolay is very important to me. I wish if we had a chapter around here, I'd really be helping them, quite frankly.
That'd be good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you have a traumatic story that maybe you're reluctant to share.
Okay.
I mean, it's historical.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. It's.
And you were there.
It's just talking about it for a second time because we had the tape issue. It's a little bit, But yeah, I was a navigator on Iowa when she was first brought in commission. I just say that as background, so I was very familiar with the ship, and that, everybody wanted to see her guns fire, so we were constantly firing the guns. So I'd seen them hundreds of times, and when I was back on board in '89, I think it was, with Second Fleet staff as ops, and they went to fire the guns. I was not interested in watching the guns shoot again. I was interested in seeing them shoot from the inside, and this is where, whether you call it fate, whether you call it the hand of God, whatever you call it. I was going down, or I talked to the gunnery officer, who was a friend of mine from department head school, about going into the turret to watching the guns, and he talked me out of going down to the turret, and that day, because they were just firing one round from each barrel, and he said, go down tomorrow when we're doing the actual naval gunfire support shooting off of Viegas, and we're going to do multiple firings, and you can really just see things work. And I said, that's a good idea, so I didn't go down. When they started firing, I went up to the flag plot, which is right behind the flag bridge, and everybody was kind of focused, I say everybody on the staff who had never seen the guns was out on the flag bridge, and everyone wanted to watch them, and I was doing other things. I had my back, just inside flag plot, I had my back to the bridge, and I heard a very different sound. It wasn't the sound that I normally knew and accustomed to with the guns firing. It was different. Didn't know what it was, just knew it was different. It has a different smell than you could normally smell with the cordite and everything. And I turned around and saw what was happening in terms of the smoke and the immediate aftermath of the elephant ears, which are the wrappers around the guns, flying through the air and smoke billowing out. And I guess training took over. I ran up to the 05 level, which is on top of the bridge, and got out a fire hose and started directing a couple fire teams from up there, which gave you a feeling of at least you're doing something, but not meaning to get vulgar, you knew it was like pissing in the wind. You're not doing anything, because each turret weighs as much as a World War II destroyer, and there's various, depending on which side of the turret you're talking about, various thicknesses of steel ranging from 3 inches to 16 inches of armor. What's a fire hose doing? They started flooding the magazines and flooding the turrets, and all of, as an explosion happened, one of the remains of one of the people in the turret, which is totally unrecognizable and barely recognizable as a body, flew out, and the fire team down on deck, Chief Palacio, who I remember very well because from my time on board, he and I had worked together a few times, and he was directing the efforts down there and removing the body, and the captain was on the 1MC about removing the body. It was very emotional to see that happen. And over the course of several minutes, there were secondary explosions as the bags of powder that were taken out of the magazines that were down in the powder flats. They were taken in elevators up to the guns for shooting, cooked off. And that went on for a while. And as I said, the magazines were being flooded. And it was interesting, in retrospect, when you think about it.
It could have been a lot worse.
It should have been theoretically a lot worse. I mean, the magazine doors were left open, which they never should have been, but nonetheless they were. So any fire had free access into the magazines themselves. But the ship was designed with these passing ports, which are kind of like gumball machines, where you put the quarter in, you turn around, only one thing
Turn the doors
can pass at any time. That's how they get the powder from the magazines into the powder flats. And they were designed to prevent fire and hold a seal, and they did. And that's what saved the ship. When magazines exploded on similar battleships, like Arizona, I think everyone knows what happened there. And like the Hood, when she was against the Bismarck, she went down in 3 minutes and had 3 survivors. So it was a situation where the ship could have been lost. For a while, everybody was concerned that we might lose her, getting concerned about stability and all the water being brought in and the fire and all that sort of stuff. And the ship was on, we used to call it the bat phone, the satellite, where the admiral was talking to the White House Situation Room in the Pentagon, and because of my knowledge of the ship, he had me come in and talk, and I was lieutenant commander at the time, and I was like, well, wait a minute, there's like 15 levels of the chain of command that just disappeared, in an instant there. But Johnson was a great guy, and he knew that, he was an aviator, and he knew he wanted somebody who could talk to things on the phone.
That was you talking to the President of the United States.
Yeah, it was interesting. And then when we came back in, or we flew off, and I also helped with the remains of the deceased and getting them prepped to leave. don't remember a lot about that. It was probably something I mentally black out, but I
Okay.
can tell you it was, in some cases, people seeming very normal where they happen to be in an area that, you know, the trauma they experienced was more the loss of oxygen